Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Chris with AppSumo, and today I am super excited to be joined with Liam Martin. So, for those of you who don't know, Liam is a serial entrepreneur who co-founded Time Doctor and Staff.com, one of the most popular time tracking and productivity software platforms in use by top brands today. He is also a co-organizer of the world's largest remote work conference, Running Remote. Liam is an avid proponent of remote work and has been published in Forbes, Inc., Mashable, TechCrunch, Fast Company, Wired, The Wall Street Journal, The Next Web, The Huffington Post, VentureBeat, and many other publications targeting the expansion of remote work. The mission statement that feeds all of the products and services Liam is involved in stem from empowering workers to work wherever they want, whenever they want. Liam, thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. I'm excited to talk about something that I actually haven't really talked about that much, which is the growth of our business, building an 8-figure SaaS business. So it's going to be pretty interesting. Usually we are pretty tight-lipped on this kind of stuff, but I thought to myself, oh, for AppSumo, I might as well open myself up a little bit and have a deeper chat with you guys.
Heck yeah. Well, I appreciate that. So let's dive right into it. So what
Sure.
is your business?
So primarily we run timedoctor.com, which is a time tracking tool for remote teams. That was generally built out of my frustration of not being able to measure how long a remote worker was working for me on a particular task. I had actually a tutoring company way back in the day. This was 15 years ago. And we made the tutoring company remote because I realized I could just jump on Skype and teach someone, and I wouldn't have to actually travel to location. So I could get like twice as much money in the same amount of time. And we ended up hiring about 100 tutors throughout North America and Europe. And the problem that I had is a tutor would bill a student for 10 hours. I'd get the bill and the student would say, hey, my tutor only worked with me for 5 hours, not for 10. And then I'd go to the tutor and I would say, hey, Jimmy says that you didn't work with him for 10 hours, but you billed for 10. And the tutor would say, of course I worked with him for 10 hours. So who do you believe? Well, you have to believe both people. So I'd refund Jimmy and I'd pay the tutor the full 10 hours, and that was destroying the business. So that's how Time Doctor came to be, which was very clearly measuring how long a remote worker works for you so that you can bill properly. If you have an agency, if you have a company, you just know where your time is going. And then outside of that, staff.com, which is an enterprise tool of the same name for remote workers. And then the one that we've been working on quite recently, which actually Noah just spoke at yesterday or 2 days ago, is Running Remote, which is the largest conference on building and scaling remote teams. That's been a passion of mine for a really long time. And there's so much information on how to hire a virtual assistant, but very little information on how to go from like 100 employees to 500 remote employees. So that's what we're focused on, is trying to scale those businesses and build billion-dollar companies that are remote.
So what were some of the biggest obstacles as you were building those tools out for remote workers?
So, I mean, and we're in kind of the age of post-COVID, maybe not post-COVID, but a lot of stuff has happened. As much stuff has happened in the last 6 months to our business as has happened in the last 9 years, right? So it's really kind of basically remote work has become a nice to have to a need to have very quickly. And so that's been an interesting challenge. In the early days, we were doing the fundamentals that any SaaS product would do: blogging, content production, running Facebook ads, paid acquisition, email campaigns, all of this general stuff that's the grind that you have to do day in, day out to be able to achieve the growth results that you want. And then I realized in the last couple months that you have to have the product, you have to have the marketing, but then if you have a certain situation, that product can become 10 times more profitable. And that's just the reality. And I understood that theoretically, but I never existed in it in a real sense. And this was the phenomenon that happened. I mean, we're taking a look at all of the different remote work tools, and people are doing 5, 10, 20x increases during COVID.
That's unbelievable. Is there anything you think you did beforehand that kind of positioned you guys to be able to, I don't want to say take advantage of the moment, but to be able to, I guess, be better positioned for it?
Sure. So in the time tracking space, there's a whole bunch of different competitors. There's competitors like Toggle, Harvest. Those are some of the big ones in the space. and they really didn't gear themselves towards remote work. So we always had a very passionate niche, which was remote work. We don't have an office. We have about 100 employees in 37 different countries all over the world, and we fundamentally eat our own dog food. We are what's called a remote first company, as opposed to an on-premise company, which is, it's kind of like a dev joke, but like no one sets up their own server racks anymore. No one does an on-premise deployment. Everyone just has employees or software in the cloud. So remote first versus on-prem. And so because of that, all of our branding and all of our philosophy as a company connected to remote work. And that's why we were able to just take advantage of this curve more, I would say, than a lot of our competitors, because they really didn't care about remote work. It was a very small niche for them, and not one that I think they really wanted to get into, but we were all about it.
So what do you think are I think there's some obvious benefits of remote work versus being on site, and you touched on a couple of them, but from your perspective, I mean, what do you think are the key things that if you were talking to a business and they were deciding like, hey, after all this blows over, should we go back to the office? Should we keep working remote? What would you say to them, or how would they evaluate the pros and cons there?
Well, I think there's a push and pull that's currently happening right now. So there's forces coming from the employee side and from the employer side. So what's currently happened right now in the space, and we're seeing this at scale because people are starting to be called back into the office. A remote worker, or a worker who went remote, is saying, hey, I have just been in my house for the past 4 months. You told me my productivity was great. Everything was going fantastic. Why do I have to go back into the office? We just tested this assumption, right? And before, they were never allowed to actually test that assumption because the manager said, well, no, we don't want to try this wacky work from home thing. And then on the employer side, the employer is saying, holy crap, 30% of my P&L is getting saved by not having an office. Why? Like, I could hire, your office lease is your second most expensive line item above staff.
Wow.
Right. So it's like by far one of the biggest ways that you can become, and on average about 30% of a P&L is physical stuff, right?
Well, I mean, you think about that for yourself. I mean, you're probably the biggest expense a person has is their rent or their mortgage. It's usually, they say, have it be about 30%, no more.
Right, exactly. So when you have that there and you can strike that out, would you rather fire 30% of your staff or get rid of the lease when everything seems to be going just fine? We've seen, we just did some early survey polling at our conference, our virtual conference running remote, and we found 22% of the people that polled said that they are canceling their leases. They're literally in the process of canceling
22%.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you are getting into the commercial lease industry, I'd highly suggest rethinking your strategy. And if you're in it right now, I would get out as quickly as possible. I
had a friend who sold a lot of commercial properties maybe 9 months ago, and couldn't be happier about that, because a lot of them are just completely struggling. Everyone's trying to renegotiate their leases.
Yep. So, I mean, we're at a point now where I would probably expect conservatively 22%, because that's something that, that's something that's happening now versus the future. I would probably put it on the aggressive stance. 50% of like corporate offices will probably be redundant inside of 12 months, which is a nuclear bomb to the US economy at least, but the global economy as well. So we don't know how we're going to get out of that situation necessarily, but I mean, that market is not coming back, just like the airline industry is not coming back. Like, a lot of these things are going to transform into a completely new thing within the next 6 to 18 months.
So what do you think with, so you say air travel, and I know this is maybe a bit off topic for you, but you think that's not coming back, or is there going to be you think a different thing's going to manifest, or just travel as an industry is?
Do you know how many airlines pre-COVID were profitable?
I do not.
Do you know how many airlines there are on planet Earth?
I do not.
There's about 400, and 20 of them were profitable. It is not a good business to be in. It's a razor blade business, and any small disruption to that market is going to completely obliterate it. And Also, which is quite interesting, 60% of the revenue of American Airlines was through business travel. Those are now
Wow.
Zoom calls.
Wow.
Like
That's
90%
terrifying.
of them are Zoom calls. They're not coming back, right?
Is there going to
So
be an element of like creative destruction though? Like these specific airlines go under, but other ones will come up that are more efficient, that take into account the changing landscape, things like that, like a Tesla airline type scenario.
I mean, that'd be awesome. I'd love to be in a Tesla airline. Like, I actually think we're probably going to have, so the tourism component of air travel is actually subsidized by business travel. That's what people don't really
That's so
understand
crazy.
is tourism travel is a very small minority of the overall dollar for an airline. The vast majority of an airline's dollar comes from business. So that's no longer coming back. I would probably say conservatively 50% of those dollars may come back. We had a deal that we closed, which was a very solid mid six-figure deal, and we closed it on Zoom like we do everything that we do. But that historically probably would have been a handshake and like a steak dinner. But it's
Mm.
not, because now it is this new thing. And our conversion rates, I mean, we're unique, but they've gone up. I've spoken to other people that are not selling remote work tools, and their conversion rates are approximately the same. And how much is Zoom? I don't even know. $10? Like, it's not a $4,000 business class ticket from New York to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
So that is going to change. I think the future of air travel is probably, I actually am, I was thinking of buying some, it's never going to be lower than it is right now, I believe. But I think we're probably going to develop a more expensive traveler. So
Mm.
someone who historically was just flying business all the time, someone who probably has, an extra $50,000 worth of disposable income, which is a very small percentage of the population. Those are the people that are not, they're going to fly when they want to fly. But a ticket they're probably only going to be business class tickets, because those are the ones that are really profitable. Those are the ones that make sense, which cost $5,000 versus a $500 flight, right? Like in the back. Those are the ones that are going to continue on in this market. And I think the average person will probably not be able to afford a flight for a very long time, 4 to 5 years.
Wow. And then in terms of the office space, do you think that's going to be again like a creative destruction type thing? They become Amazon warehouses, or what do you hypothesize there?
I think that there is going to be an AWS for offices. I think that there's going to be a interspace where you can connect, you can collaborate, you can discuss. You probably heard the recent news that Starbucks is shutting down 400 of their stores
I didn't hear
because they
that.
so they're shutting down 400 of their stores because they're realizing that the actual physical location doesn't make sense. They're making more profit just from delivering a coffee through Uber Eats than it is to actually physically have a location. So there's going to be a significant need for people that go to coffee shops and kind of sit down and hack away and talk about stuff and maybe chat with their friend about business. There's going to be a space for that. It was WeWork before WeWork completely imploded, but I think there will be a space like that in the future. And it's going to unfortunately take a couple years because everyone's licking their wounds over the multi-billion mistake that WeWork was. So it'll take a while, but there will be that type of platform where I can work out of my co-working space in Austin, and then I also have access to that same brand of co-working space in pretty much every other major city. The other side of that, by the way, is quite interesting. A lot of large corporates, which I'm talking to with Time Doctor, they're opening up their own co-working space networks. So they have their own private spaces that no one has their own like desk. It's all float space.
Mm.
So you'd open up a major, the U.S. Patent Office is a perfect example of that. They have 24,000 employees. They have 0 offices, but they do have. I'd kind of define them as crash pads. So they have to show up to work once a week. They physically must be in one of those offices once a week. But a patent officer, they do not have a physical they're always moving. So it actually makes perfect sense for them to be able to have these like interspace offices where they just sort of sit down, have a meeting, talk about something, and then go back on the road.
So that's going to kind of become the law of the land. You just have a WeWork type setup where whatever city you're in, wherever you're at, you can just check in, have your office space, go from there.
I'm just about to move and I have a spare Airbnb apartment. Like it's a connected space.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually thinking of turning that into like just a cool hangout spot for my own personal office, but then also just to invite people that are interested in paying some money and kind of just have that space so that I can be social, but then at any point I can just walk 35 seconds and be completely alone.
Mm. So for the employees, what are some of the things you mentioned? Some of the employer reasons. What are kind of the pros and cons on the employee side? I mean, obviously, people like, or a lot of people like working from home. There's
Yep.
no commute. What else? Build upon that.
So I have another gutsy, ballsy move because we're going to record this and it's going to be documented for all time. In 5 years, the majority of people will not want to work remotely in 5 years from now because it will be so we're at 60% right now, the US workforce working remotely. It was 5.5% in 2018. So we've just exploded. But the reality is once employers recognize, and they already have, how cheap this is. 74% of CFOs say that they want to in part or completely remain remote after COVID, which is an insane number for Fortune 500 companies. The employee will say, yeah, this is great, I can work from home. And then distractions will start to set in, Netflix, your phone, Facebook pings, and I have a PlayStation right next to me. That thing's always pulling my attention away from what I need to be doing. There will be a major push to try to get back inside of the office. And also, I think there may be, historically, there's always been like first level and second level employees. So if you were really good at your job, you got to work in the office. But if you weren't very good at your job, you were remote. That's also going to start to work its way en masse into the greater work world. So it's going to be, these distractions that are starting are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And the productivity metrics, because you had mentioned before that employees are more productive than when they work from home, and that's absolutely true. But it's actually a very counterintuitive way of understanding this. The average worker spends or saves 2.5 hours when they work from home because they're not commuting. So if you literally sleep for an extra 2.5 hours, you're going to be a more productive worker, right? So there's like a lot of interesting counterintuitive data points to kind of break that down. Remote work is by far more productive, but it's not because the individual employee is productive per minute. It's because of the way that work day is structured and the freedom that they have to be able to interact with their family and be able to get focused work done and not have distractions from other employees. So it's not just hey, you're more productive. In reality, actually, there's a lot of distractions that work their way into remote work agreements.
That's interesting, though, that you touch on that, where it's not just the commute. It's also like, distractions, side conversations that you could have, going out to lunch, figuring all that out. They're just so many little things that work their way into it versus just going into the kitchen, getting lunch, and coming back to work, even if it's the same number of hours. And
the funny thing is that it feels like work, right? So, oh man, I went to work. I left at 9 and I came back at 5. The average amount of work that someone does from a 9 to 5 is 2 hours and 46 minutes.
Now, where does that come from? How do they actually is that just like computer tracking? Yeah, no, there it is.
That's what we're doing, right? So like we measure that very directly and we show, hey, you know what? So my philosophy is don't show up from 9 to 5. Show up from 12 to 4. Get could you give me 4 solid hours of grind work done? I'll take that above an average 9 to 5 any day of the week. I guess I can swear on this. You can fuck off and you can go and do whatever you want to do from 9 to 12. And by the way, sleep in. I'm super stoked if you come well rested to the job, right? And put in 4 hours of real work, because fundamentally the what we say is work is not work. It is doing a meeting, playing with my phone under the desk while that meeting is going on, going to my desk, checking my Facebook, checking, playing a little bit of Candy Crush under my desk before I actually get to start to work. Have my iPad out, watch Netflix while I'm typing on my computer. These are all things that are connected. This is like the average workday, when in reality, what you need to do is just have a really focused amount of time that doesn't have distractions, that you can get shit done. That's the best model, and it makes you feel good too. You know, if you can really lock in those 4 hours and then go get some extra sleep, go to the gym, you're going to be such a better employee than the average 9 to 5.
I got a lot of things to talk to you about there, because it brings up a lot of interesting points. I guess the first question I have is, what do you find that employers feel when they hear that? Because I would imagine, like, do you get the response that, wait, they're only working 2 hours and 45 minutes? Like, we need to find a way to increase that because, like, I'm paying them for 8 hours, or what is the response?
So I try to explain to them, you can't get above that number. It's science. It's like, you have a certain amount of attention in your brain, and it's very, very difficult to be able to get more focused time out of your workday. There are some people that can do it, but the vast majority of people that say that they put in 12 hours, they're not actually putting in 12 hours. It's like a whole bunch of distractions, and then they're doing some work in between. And frankly, there's this Japanese like work philosophy of, because I'm in the office, I'm working. Just because you're in the office, that has zero connection to whether or not you're productive as a worker. So we tell people, like, we'll look at people's data and we'll say, it looks to me like the person that's doing the 20-hour work week seems to be getting as much done as the person that has a 40-hour work week. Maybe we should just tell everybody to go home and you'll get exactly the same amount of work done, and people will be happier. They can go to the gym, you know, they can exercise. Like, we actually internally inside of our company, we tell people, hey, if you go to the gym every day, like, we'll give you, like, that's work time. Like, put that time in, because that's actually going to make you more productive. It's going to fire more neurons off in your brain to be able to make it happen. We have a Fitbit, and this is an Oura ring, which I think
we're doing a giveaway with them right now. Yeah.
Perfect example. So we do an API integration with them.
No shit.
So I measure whether or not I'm getting enough physical activity and how that impacts my overall productivity. And there is a massive positive correlation between physical activity and my focus time.
Right? Does Oura track physical activity? I thought it was for sleep. Or
it also
both?
Tracks steps. It tracks your temperature.
Awesome.
It tracks everything. Yeah, it's a very, very cool tool.
I'm going to have to get myself, because a couple of guys in the office have those. But I think that's a really interesting point you bring up. And that's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about and having conversations with people at AppSumo about, is just like, how do you structure your time, structure your day? Because when quarantine first started happening, it was me and my girlfriend were basically working just like around the clock, cranking through things, like waking up at 8, working till 11, squeezing food in there. And then it just becomes so unmanageable. It's like, it felt like we were getting a lot of things done, but just, in the back of your mind, it's not sustainable. And so what I've moved into kind of the past month or so we interviewed James Clear early on, and I've been using his habit journal and just keeping a track of my schedule and doing, you were saying noon to 4. I've been doing, like, cause I'm an early riser. So I'll do like 8 to noon is like, I just have it blocked off for the deep work, the focus on my calendar, and then try to push the meetings or the interviews or anything like that to later in the day, where it's like, just view this 4-hour chunk of work as like the time you actually get work done, whether you need to write something up or you need to create a present or whatever it is. And so that's interesting. I mean, what strategies have you found for somebody if they're getting into this and they're not used to having a schedule? Because they kind of see like, well, I go to the office from 8 to 6 and I'll figure it out once I'm there because I'm kind of trapped there.
Sure. So, I mean, the 8 to 6, 9 to 5 mentality is based off the Industrial Revolution. It's literally someone showing up and saying, go make widgets for a certain amount of time, right? The invention of the clock was literally to make sure that people would be able to get to the factory on time. This has zero correlation, and I'm talking zero, with productivity. So when we look at where people spend their times, it actually, there's much higher correlation as to what type of work you're doing, as opposed to, whether you should be a 9 to 5 or a 5 to 3 o'clock in the morning. So developers, as an example, they have an interesting, weird work kind of flow, because we're able to track all this metadata inside of Time Doctor. And we found that developers are almost perfectly correlated to creative writers, to people that like write novels. So they won't do anything for like a day and a half, and then they'll just grind for 14 hours because they're in the zone, and then they won't do anything for another day and a half. And so that's an insane model, right, inside of the business world.
Sounds
right?
like nurses, just like pulling a long ass shift and then sleeping for 2 days.
Right. So you wouldn't think, most developers are like, well, you have to come into the office in no-name Palo Alto office from 9 to 5, and then you go home. Well, most developers, at least the most successful ones that we see on our network, they work at night. They actually much prefer working at night. So they're night owls. Usually they end up, I think the numbers were like till 2 o'clock in the morning for like the highest quartile of successful developers inside of our network. So, it's a very, it's just a counterintuitive. All of the things that we think are the way that we should work were built by a system that was invented about 250 years ago. So you really have to kind of sit back and say to yourself, and when you look at it, nothing is science-based. All of it is just, well, that's the way it was done, and that's what I learned in my MBA, so therefore that's what we should do. And there actually has never been a tool like ours, which is the largest second-by-second work database on the planet, to be able to measure all of that metadata and tell you, this is the definition of productivity. Like 4 hours a day is probably the max that you could get out of a workday, to be completely honest with you. And if your employer tells you something different, email me. I can prove to them that that's not the case. But when we do suggest that to, to big boards of people that are 60 plus years old that wear suits, they kind of look at me like I'm from Mars. Even though I can prove without a shadow of a statistical doubt that this is the way that your organization should operate to be able to maximize productivity. So a lot of those things are just not going to change fundamentally.
Yeah. Well, from the employer's point of view, or the employee's point of view, I imagine that's a pretty freeing thing to hear as well, because you might feel like, oh man, these other people, I see them at the office all day long and they're always there, and I just feel like I'm not doing that. So even if you're putting in, that maximum of 4 hours, it's like, if you know that and you're like, hey, if I can just buckle down and crush it for this period of time, which might be 50% of what they say I should be working, but not seeing that as a failure, seeing that if you're actually getting good work done there, then you can kind of check that off as a successful day.
Have you ever heard of, it's a Japanese word for karoshi.
It's like working yourself to death?
Yeah. So the literal definition, I just looked it up. It's death caused by overwork or job-related exhaustion. And this is not just like
we don't even have that concept in the US.
Yeah. So it's not something that just sort of like, oh yeah, someone died of karoshi. During the mid-2000s, there were about 300 deaths a year from karoshi. And we're talking like 25-year-old men that have had 180 hours of overtime and die of a stroke. Not productive. And actually, when you look at the GDP, again, getting super nerdy here, if you look at the GDP per capita in Japan and you adjust it to the US's GDP per capita, GDP per hour, the GDP per hour in the United States is about $102.20. The GDP per hour in Japan is $63.12. So they're working, on average, about 6 hours more per day, or they're in the office about 6 hours more per day than the average US worker, but yet the average US worker is twice as productive. How does that make sense? But yet that will never change in Japan. Well, maybe not never. It's going to take a lot of real aggressive science to be able to prove to them that that's not the way to go. And even in the United States, we have this philosophy of like, it's like hustle porn, right? Which in our space is everywhere. Hustle hard. No, that's stupid. That's really like hustling means like, yeah, sure, do everything that you possibly can to be able to succeed, but exercise, get enough sleep, um, read books that are written by smart people. These are the ways that you can actually become better at what you're doing, not necessarily by commenting on, you know, 400 different Instagram posts every day. That's just a waste of your time at the end of the day.
How do you
Hopefully the next guy you have on is not like the Instagram post guy.
how do you get over that kind of is it just to ignore it, that cultural component to it? Because yeah, we do have that very much like that meme of the hustle porn of just like wake up at 4 a.m., put 2 hours in at the gym, then go to work, drop your kids off, and it's just like go, 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 go. And there's like a pride and an ego attached to it. Is there a way that do you think just more people doing remote work is going to help shift that away from it, or how do you see it going?
I think it already has. But when
Yeah,
you see what COVID has given us, and it's given us a lot of horrific stuff that I would never trade for the positive aspects of it,
for
the
sure.
silver linings. But it's taught us all how to slow down and
Mm,
really figure out where is our time being placed and what are the returns on our time, right? I mean, like, do you have to go into the office every day? Or would it be a lot better to say, forget about the office, and what we'll do instead is every Friday we'll go out to lunch with all of my coworkers. That is going to get you all of that energy that you want from the office environment, and it's going to cost you a fraction of the price, and you're going to be happier, and you're going to be able to get a couple hours of extra sleep per day.
mm,
It is undoubtedly the model that will be successful. And I think the only barrier to entry right now, or before COVID hit, was people were scared to try it. The number one reason for remote work not being deployed in a company was actually the reason why we built our product. We don't know if they're productive
mm.
when they're working from home. We've now proven that that's not true. Basically, that thesis has been confirmed, that people are productive when they work from home, at least tangentially. So like we do have some positive indicators. The TI-28 forms are coming in, the widgets are being made approximately at the same speed as they were before, and everyone's a lot happier. EMPS actually, inside of work from home companies and remote companies, is on average a third higher than it
Wow.
is inside of office companies. It is the number one thing that you can do to be able to improve employee happiness, on top of giving people a 20% increase in their salary. So there was a really good poll that was done in the Buffer State of Remote Work report that showed that people would not trade a 20% increase in their salaries if it meant going back into an office.
Hmm.
So think about that. I mean, that's the value of it. It's definitely a huge power for good. And I would not wish COVID on anyone, and I wish that wasn't happening. I really want to get in a plane again. But there is that silver lining, which is I think people are going to be so much more less stressed in a post-COVID world due to remote work.
Have you seen employers doing any interesting things like that in terms of adjusting employee benefits?
Well, so right now, and I think that process has already kind of happened, is we're at a point where, like 3 months ago, everyone was just like, holy crap, how do I work remotely? I don't know what to do. We're terrified. The whole world is going to come collapsing down. Now they're kind of pulling back into a perspective of, yeah, this whole remote working thing, it seems to be okay. It seems like we're still getting our bills paid. And we're starting to see a little bit of that. The employee advantages, I think we're probably going to see a lot more of it happening in the next 6 months. The architecture at scale of remote work is really going to start to put itself together. Like we threw up almost like the pop tent of remote work over the last quarter, where it was just sort of like, okay, can you guys use Zoom? How do we, how do we make sure that people get their emails, that kind of stuff. I had a client that had about 20,000 people, and they needed to go remote within 24 hours because the government was implementing a very harsh lockdown in their country. And he was very stressed out because he was trying to source trucks to get to that office to load up all of the computers and then deliver that computer to that employee's house within 24 hours and set them up with a really good high-speed internet connection to be able to run a call center. Now that's all passed, but that infrastructure is still there. So we kind of had this inference of like, holy crap, we got to go remote, but it's actually going to take a really long time for people to even think about going back to the old ways, because I think they recognize that they were way better than what was out on the other end. And we're seeing this on the employee side as well. A lot of the employees, when we poll them, hey, how was your work from home experience the first 3 months? They're like, amazing. The only actual negative factor connected to that is if you have kids.
Yes,
so if you have kids,
too.
Yeah, if you have kids, you are seeing it more negatively than if you don't. But work from home is not remote work. So work from home is the kids are at home too. They can't go to school. Like there's a lot of that
it's
stuff.
It's different if they're out at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning every day.
That's it. That's when, the parents can come out and play and do remote work for a couple hours.
Well, and, then it's also a good, on the flip side of that, it's a good kind of time to shut down the computer. If they're coming home from school at 3 o'clock and you're like, all right, mommy, daddy got to do another hour of work, but then like we're closing the laptops and we're going back, versus right now, it's just, I imagine a lot of people could get into that feeling of you're always in this constant like work, non-work vibe where you're never being fully productive and you're never fully relaxed because everything's always a Slack message away.
Oh yeah, well, that's a really important factor connected to remote work. You need to be able to create a sacred space for work. So as an example, I have an office here. I know you can't see it because I've got a beautiful background, but I close the door, I'm 10,000 miles away. If you want to come and talk to me, you actually have to call me. You have to call me on my phone or text me to be able to get out of this room. And if you've created that very sacred space, and you've told everyone that you live with that this is my space, then it's going to remove a lot of that stress. And then you can just close your laptop. And even if I have to take a social call, I will literally get up out of this room. I'll leave the room and I'll take the call there. So I'm disconnecting the two, social to work, because you don't want those two worlds melding together. Even if you can't get your own office, way back in the day, I had a spot on my couch and I would only sit on that. When I sat on that spot on the couch, I was working. And when I wasn't sitting on that spot on the couch, I wasn't working.
Yeah. I love that. No, that's something similar that I've done, where I have a chair right over there, which is where like, if I want to read or I want to do something else, or I'm watching YouTube videos, it's like, it's in that chair. At this desk is where I do the work, where I do the interviews, where I do the Zoom calls and all that, because it is, I think people underestimate that kind of psychological component of just having the specific setup for when you're productive versus when you're kind of turning off.
Yep, absolutely.
Have you noticed anything? Because I would imagine this is like could be a pro and a con. I'm curious if you've seen anything in the regard to, as companies are going remote, they're starting to see, hey, we're not just limited, we're in Austin. So we're not just limited to hiring people in Austin. We can hire people from around the country. We can hire people around the globe. But at the same time, then does that cause potential issues with, US employees, where it's, hey, we could get people a lot cheaper to do this type of labor, where we've seen it a lot in certain like manufacturing industries or auto industries, but for it to hit kind of the digital environment, I don't think we've seen as much. Where is that something that you're noticing? Is that a cause for concern?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube video that's actually going live next week, youtube.com/runningremote, if I can give that pitch. And we are going, the title is basically San Francisco is screwed. So we've seen the dominoes start to fall. Google says that they're going to be remote by 2022. Twitter has shut down their offices. Facebook is going 50% remote. Shopify went completely remote. I've had calls from tech companies that are around 1,000 people that I don't know if I can actually disclose, that have all told me privately, we're shutting down our offices and we're going remote. They're all jobs where the average salary is $200,000. So $200,000 US job in San Francisco and Palo Alto. And the reason why you could only access that job in San Francisco is because you, number one, were a really hot ass developer or marketer or salesperson. But secondly, because you were in San Francisco. We had an employee that worked with us for about 3 years. He got third place in the Facebook Global Hackathon. And he lives in Bangladesh. He took a $50,000 job from us and said no to a $600,000 job in San Francisco for Facebook because he didn't want to leave Bangladesh. Now, $50,000 in Bangladesh is a lot of money. It's like $500,000 in San Francisco. But that trend will accelerate. And I can kind of lay out, I like making these types of, projections, and since they're recorded, we can like go back. Within the next 2 years, you're going to see over 100,000 people leave San Francisco that are in that top quartile. A 1%er is $320,000 a year in the United States. So those almost 1%ers, those 2%ers are going to leave the United States. They're probably going to enter mostly the Midwest because they've recognized like small towns that have a major university in them. Are going to be where they're going to go because their cost per square foot is 6 times cheaper in those areas than they would be in San Francisco. There's also going to be a huge influx of digital nomadism. So we're going to see digital nomadism probably 10x. So if you go to Bali right now, which is where we run one of our versions of running remote, you can get a 4-bedroom villa for about $1,000 US per month with a servant that literally does everything that you could possibly want in your life.
I was looking into Buenos Aires recently, and it's a very similar thing. It's just, for $900,000 a month, you get a luxury building in the heart of downtown.
You're already thinking about it because you've now been working remotely for a couple months, and you're like, well, maybe we'll go to Buenos Aires, right? Like, sounds pretty awesome to me. So that's going to happen as stage 1. Stage 2 is Facebook and Google and Twitter and Shopify and all of these big tech companies are going to say to themselves, well, our team is now already distributed, so our job applications will be distributed, and now geography doesn't matter. So just because you're in Palo Alto doesn't mean you're the best developer. And you're going to see, I would say conservatively, a 50% drop in the average salary of like what was a San Francisco dev salary within the next 3 years. And it's not going to be pretty for a lot of those developers. The one single niche of remote work. So developers are by far an overrepresented group that love remote work, but because they are in such high demand, they've been able to dictate terms. So their salaries are very, very high in comparison. An average marketer is, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year that knows what they're doing. The average developer is $200,000. That will completely change because there is talent. There's a company that I love quite a bit called Six Nomads, which is basically an HR matching product for Eastern European developers. And the average cost of a developer there is about 35,000 US, but they are as good as everyone in Palo Alto.
Yeah,
that
a lot
will
of the
switch.
Partners we have on AppSumo are Eastern European and create incredible products. It's wild.
Yeah, so that's going to be, we're going to see not a brain drain. We're just going to see the reverse of a brain drain. Actually, we're going to probably see competition for talent that you've just never seen before, because now large corporate knows, wow, remote work works. We should probably just start hiring legitimately remotely, and it doesn't matter where they're located.
So I think that's going to sound really scary to a lot of people. What would you recommend to them to either bolster their resume or bolster their ability to maintain employed or maintain the salary or close to it? What would you say to people who are either in San Francisco or just kind of working in this space that hear that and kind of makes them shaky?
If you're listening to this right now or watching this right now, you probably know it inside of your bones, whether you're hot shit, whether you're like a top 10 percentile guy or if you're middle of the rung replaceable, right? You've got about 18 months to get yourself up to the 10th percentile. That's the reality. You've got, like, there are more university graduates, there are more graduate students, PhDs, coming out of India than there are university students coming out of the United States. And like, these aren't crappy schools. These are really good schools. These people know what they're talking about. They're incredibly well educated. They're coming for your jobs. And this is actually, I think this is going to be a second wave of, we saw the first wave of outsourcing during the late 90s and early 2000s, but this is just going to stem a movement that's going to pale in comparison to anything that we've seen before.
Are there any types of jobs that you think are more immune to this than others?
Well, so in terms of remote work, there's absolutely a rate of, people that work remotely versus not working remotely. So almost 100% of accountants can work remotely. Business operations and specialists, 95%. Secretaries, customer service reps, 95% can go remote. On the other side of it, like maintenance workers, assemblers and fabricators, the general concept is about 25% of that organizational structure can be made remote. Teaching assistants, about 35%. General operations manager, elementary school teachers, retail salespeople, about 45% of those can be made remote. It really just depends on how you want to structure yourself. I have my partner, my wife runs a mermaid school, and I have literally mermaid like fins everywhere in my house. And she runs about 15 locations. She also runs one in Austin, Texas, if you ever want to go. And that is a product that can never be made remote because it's consumed physically in that point. So think to yourself, what cannot go remote? That's what you really want to make sure that you can do. But outside of that, I actually think you're going to get very niched down. So like, we're going to be able to say, hey, you're not just a marketer. I'm taking marketing because that's what I do. I'm just not going to work on marketing. I'm going to work on SEO. And more specifically, I'm going to work on infographic SEO. And I'm your guy. If you want to deliver an infographic and for me to get 500 referring domains for your infographic, I'm your guy. Because that's a relatively small group. And I can do that for a lot of clients very quickly and easily. The generalists, the people that just do a little bit of everything, I think that they are going to be replaceable very quickly, unfortunately.
It's interesting because I was reading The Black Swan at the beginning of quarantine, and one of the points he makes in that book is don't go into a scalable profession unless you're the best in the world, because then 80-20 principle is going to kick in, and all of these hierarchies going to establish, and all of the winnings are going to go to the people in that very, very top quartile, versus there's always been this kind of, or at least in more modern times, this looking down upon some of those blue collar jobs, those jobs you can only do locally, jobs that don't scale. But in reality, those ones are much more robust to intrusion because it's only based on the carrying capacity of the specific location that you're in.
Oh yeah. I mean, I know for me, when I look at where I am versus some of my friends. I have a friend of mine that went through grad school with me, and he's now an electrician, and he makes like $120,000 a year, and he's doing really well as an electrician. And he's very happy. He doesn't work as many hours as I do. His 2 kids. Life is really good, and that's something that will never go remote, ever. So if you're not in that type of an industry, get really good at what you do. We hire people that are like mid 6-figure salaries, very, very, very expensive people, because we need someone to complete a job who is the absolute top of their game. And there may only be 100 of those people on planet Earth. And they know that they're that top of those people on planet Earth, and they take that position, and we cannot negotiate on that particular salary because they know they're the best. If you're at that point, this is, life's going to be fine for you. If anything, actually, your salary is probably going to go up. But if you're the mid person, if you're the guy that's just never really, you're okay, but you're not the absolute top of the chain, it's not going to be good for you over the next couple of years. That was very negative, but that's the truth.
We'll find a way to round it off well.
Hey, no worries, man.
Do you think there's going to be more of a resurgence of those more local type jobs? I know Mike Rowe, his whole thing is that there's, at least as of the last time I heard it, like a year ago, something like 7 million jobs that were unfilled for some of those like electrician, plumber, trucker type jobs that, they'll be 6-figure jobs, those trade school type jobs. Do you think there's going to be more of that coming up, or a flood of people going towards those professions that feel a bit more secure?
I mean, I would personally, if I had to do it over again, knowing what I know now, and knowing the statistical chances of being able to replicate my success over again, I'd be a plumber. Plumbing's fun. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's cool. And being an electrician is fun. Getting into those trades, working with your hands is something that a lot of people, the blue collar, they look down on them, but in reality, accounting, so the legal field, the accounting field, I would say that within the next 5 years, and this is already happening now, they're basically customer service agents at this point. Most of the taxation, when you file your taxes with an accountant, it's not you that files the taxes. It's an AI that files it for you, right? They collect the information, they just collect the information, and they give it to someone in India that literally processes your file for you. And then it spits itself back out and you hand it over to your client. That's going to just keep happening. And this is just an accelerator. We've kind of almost paused here because the space really didn't know what to do with itself. Just in 2008 was like the age of the middle manager disappearing. When you look at the org chart of what happened in 2008, everyone was terrified, everyone was losing money. And then they said, well, where should we cut? Middle management, let's just cut out half the managers. And then they're like, whoa, the same numbers are being produced here. Why would we want to hire these people back? It's exactly the same thing with remote work. The offices are gone. You're going to now recognize that you can hire that talent wherever you're located. It's not going to be and it's for top tier jobs, it's absolutely going to be the United States. It's going to be, Western countries that have very good universities, but a lot of that talent is going to go to Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. And they're going to be very happy with it because their salaries will double.
Yeah. Wow. So what are some of the silver linings we can wrap up on? What are some of the things that for people to do, some takeaways?
Yeah, I think for people that are watching this right now, be the best at what you can, be the very best in what you do. And if you can't be the very best at a large thing that you do, niche down until you know what you're really, really good at and present that. I call it the portfolio technique. So you just come in with your portfolio and you say, well, I am very good at this, this, and this. And that's what I'm really good at. You should hire me if that's the problem that you're looking for. If that's not the problem you're looking for, I shouldn't work with you. It's not the right fit. So be confident with what you're good at. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give to people. And then outside of that, the people that are really good at their jobs are going to be able to experience a work-life balance that they just would have never experienced before. I think that we're going to be moving out of cities at a pretty fast pace. I mean, I remember 10 years ago seeing a house on 6th Street for $40,000 that I remember. I was like, why didn't I buy that thing? Because it's now worth probably $4 million.
Yeah.
These types of you're going to go, these people that can navigate the global economy are going to be the kingmakers. They're going to be the people that make fantastic amounts of money, but more importantly, don't have to be in a particular place at a particular time in order to generate that money. So you're also going to see the distribution of talent across the world, right? You're going to be able to find really amazing people that are just down your street, that maybe this person is an absolute expert on how to structure, US European corporate partnerships, but they've decided to live in Tulsa because they just can, and they dictate where they go. So if that's you, you're going to experience a really fantastic lifestyle. You just need to be able to kind of hold on, get through the next 6 months, and out the other end, we're going to have an economy that's designed specifically for you.
And if you're not at that point, I mean, I have seen so many course creators and things like that be giving away their courses for free or for massive discounts. There's so many ways to learn online right now. So if you want to develop that skill set, I mean, what are some of the things you like? I mean, obviously not to plug AppSumo, but we have plenty of courses on there for people to learn. I know Teachable has a ton. There's a lot of specific entrepreneurs giving stuff away. I mean, Amazon has 1 billion books for you. What would you recommend for learning if you're not there?
YouTube. Go to YouTube, type in what you're looking for. You will find one that was shot 3 months ago with fantastic production quality, and they're going to lay it all out for you. And they're really stoked about peeling potatoes in the right way, right? Like maybe this guy's been thinking about it for months and has just decided to make a YouTube video about it. Like there's no excuse. The education barrier, there's zero, there's none. This is one of the frustrations that I have with the Western philosophy towards education, is that it has to be encapsulated throughout, like inside of a school, and it totally doesn't. We usually don't hire people that have top tier degrees, even though I have one. We hire based off experience. That's it. So we're hiring a VP of growth right now. Do you have more than 10 years of VP growth experience? You do? Oh, okay. Have you worked at a company that I would know about? Yep. I want to talk to you. That's it. I don't care whether you went to MIT 7 times, right? Like it just doesn't make it, that's going to become a less and less valuable asset as we move through this economy.
Yeah. Well, Liam, this was a very, very interesting conversation. We haven't had many like this on here before. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this. I think it gives people a lot to think about. And I think it's valuable to see some things that you need to focus on, some things that, might not be pointed out as clearly as you've just laid it out right here. Do you have any last words before we sign off?
The biggest one was we actually just went on tangents for all of this entire conversation. I don't think we actually got to what we wanted to talk about. That's fine. I think we did okay. If you want to learn more about me, just go to youtube.com/runningremote, which is where we have all of our talks up for free. So if you want all of the content from Running Remote, you can check that out. Runningremote.com is our main website if you want to check out one of our free events that we're running every 2 months. And then if you want to check out Time Doctor, 14-day free trial, timedoctor.com.
Awesome. Liam, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and for all of your experience and insights in this. And everyone watching this, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Liam, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.